All right, everybody, welcome to the event that we have going on this morning. It is early 8 a.m. My name is Wes Leeser. I'm the practice director for the marketing search team at Verseek Search in Minneapolis. We're going to get going here as we wait for all the attendees all the people in attendance to show up. So we wanted to just kick it off with a couple of questions for everybody, very serious questions for 8 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. So Edwin, if you want to put it up, first question is, since COVID hit, how many happy hours have you attended? So we like to start it serious early on in the morning. Like I said, as we're waiting for everybody to come up, and make sure that in the comment section, if you have any kind of funny stories, as far as this question that you want to share, obviously maybe not too funny, but just kind of funny stories that you want to share. Really the purpose of the business marketing of Minnesota is to just create engaging conversation. So, as we're going through this webinar, if you see other people in attendance that you want to just communicate with, feel free to instant message them, shoot them a note, kind of chat, and go at it that way. So it looked like just a few. Okay. All right. And then just, and one more question as we wait for a couple of other people to kind of show up here. How has working remotely impacted your productivity? And I will say with a caveat that if you happen to be on Heather or Jody's team and attending this webinar, you do not have to answer this question if you don't want.
It's anonymous.
It's anonymous. Yes, correct.
First of all, they were not allowed to be on this today.
Okay.
Wow.
They're too busy.
That's right.
Absolutely. We get some, and again, throughout the entire time, we're going to have increased. Okay.
Wow.
Nice.
There we go. Yeah. Very cool. Already worked remotely. All right. Yeah. And then throughout the entire panel, if you can't tell already, we're meaning for this to be very light and just really spark good conversation. So throughout the entire time, we're going to have the chat open or the Q&A section where we do have Edwin, who's part of the BMA, kind of working the questions in the background. So if you do have a question that you want to put in there, Edwin's going to kind of pull from those questions a couple of really thoughtful questions, and we're just going to kind of answer them as we go through. So yes, it'll be informative, but it'll also be very conversational as well. So now that the first couple of questions are out of the way, wanted to officially welcome you again. My name is Wes Leeser. I'm the marketing recruiting leader for Verseek Search based out of Minneapolis. We have a panel of local marketing executives here. That was actually an event we were going to do back in April, but obviously due to COVID, the kibosh got put on that. But there was so much interest around the topic back then that we really wanted to bring it back up now, especially in an environment where there's also a lot of other people, losing their positions and stuff like that. We want to make sure that we're allowing support. And, a long time ago, somebody told me that with whatever you want to do in life, take advice from people who are where you want to be. And that's what we really tried to bring into this panel is, leaders, experts that are really thought leaders, not only in the marketing space, but also in career development. So with that being said, I will be quiet. We're going to go through just kind of all of the panelists. They're going to give just a brief overview of, who they are, where they work, what they've done. And then we're going to kind of get into the questions here. So with that, Heather, I'll turn it over to you and go from there.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Heather Teskey, and I am currently serve as the Chief Marketing Officer for Deluxe. I've been there almost 2 years. And prior to that, I started my career in the ad agency world, spent about a decade there, and actually a few years of that in Australia. So I had the opportunity to stand up an office and sort of build a new business, almost think about it as a small business internationally, and then came back I sort of joined the client side with Hallmark, and I spent over a decade at Hallmark leading their B2B marketing and product areas, and then had the gift of coming over to Deluxe. And Deluxe is on a transformation journey. We have moved from being a company of companies to one company. So it's a really exciting time as we brought our marketing organization together as a shared service. And how do you stand that up? And really, we launched it the week before COVID happened. So interesting times, but really thrilled to be here, and just can't wait to have the conversation with the great people on the panel that I have with me.
Great. Tony, you are next over on the Brady Bunch. I'll let you go next.
Good morning, everyone. Tony Harris. Thank you so much for making time for this today. I'm really looking forward to participating, and I think we'll all get something out of this session. My background's in lifestyle sports, entertainment, medical device, and technology marketing. I'm currently founder and chairman of Think B2B, a transformational management consulting firm with offices in La Jolla, California, and in Minneapolis. And I've run the firm for roughly 5 years, and prior to that, I spent nearly 9.5 years with DigiKey, a global distributor of board-level electronic components, as their chief marketing officer and head of global strategy. And decided to, hang my shingle, as they say, and continue to, apply my trade globally. And again, that's kind of my background, and I'm looking forward to being able to share some of the insights that I have along with my friends that are joining us on the call.
Jody?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today. First, just want to say thank you to Business Marketing Minnesota, to Edwin, to Wes, to Susan, to Mike, to everybody who worked very hard to put the event together. So thank you, and thank you for inviting myself and Heather and Tony. I'm Jody Vogelaar. I'm currently head of marketing and content for Sports Engine, based here in Minneapolis. We are part of NBC Sports, based in Stamford, Connecticut, but the company was founded here in Minnesota. So I think many people know who Sports Engine is. If you don't, it's most easily summarized as the youth sports technology division of NBC Sports. I'm a Minnesota native, attended Bethel University for my undergrad. I started my MBA at St. Thomas, but that was interrupted when my wife and I decided to move to Los Angeles. So I completed my MBA there while working for Disney Interactive. The bulk of my career, has been in media and technology. I worked for about 10 years at Fox in Los Angeles in their broadcast and cable TV division, and then later briefly in London as part of their parent company News Corporation in their newspaper division. And then finally, slowly made my way back to Minnesota via 2 more stops in California. I went back to Fox in LA for 2 more years to lead as VP of marketing in their distribution group. Spent a couple years in Silicon Valley working for Roku, the streaming media platform. And now very happy to be back in the Twin Cities near my family and friends again, working for a great company with a great mission and a fun, talented group of marketers.
All right, thanks, Jody, and thanks to all the panelists, and thanks again, and special thanks to Tony. If you didn't know, he's actually out on the West Coast right now, so it is just after 6 o'clock. So appreciate you joining us early. And one more housekeeping note. Really wanted to thank everybody. Obviously, this was a free webinar, but we did allow for donations to the We Love Lake Street group, and we really do want to thank everybody who did donate to that cause. Obviously, being Minnesota and Minneapolis based, it's a cause that's really close to every local person. So we do really want to thank everybody who did decide to do that. So jumping into kind of the discussion here, one of the things that we talked about, during our prep conversation is that the pathway to becoming a CMO, a marketing executive, does not happen by accident. There are a series of choices and decisions that you've made along your path, maybe people that have helped you in your career. So what we're going to do is we're going to have each one of the panelists just kind of go through, their path and share their story of what's helped them get to where they are today, and share some tips and tricks along the way. So we'll go in reverse order, and Jody, we'll start with you.
Sure. Apologies in advance if I'm long-winded here. I wasn't sure how much advice everyone should give. But, I think the first step is you have to be very honest and very intentional with what it is you're good at and what it is that you enjoy. It's easy at the start of your career, at the midpoint of your career, to be swayed by a title, by a friend, by a salary. And ultimately, you'll be fine, right? But I think you're going to really excel if you stay intentional in the industry that you love and passionate about what you want to do. So for me, that was media, and I stuck with that despite having to make sacrifices like move to another city to forge that career path. But I think it is important if you want to be truly successful. The other thing I want to say is, I want to try to give very practical information today. So I'm going to give a couple examples of what I think is crucial. And if you're going to get on the C-suite's radar and forge a path to CMO, first and foremost, you have to get noticed. And so, here's a couple of ways that I think, have impacted my career and others. You can apply this, how it works for your industry or your particular situation. But number one, you have to raise your hand and you have to come from a place of yes. There's no sitting in the back of the auditorium on the path to CMO. And while I'm like that in my personal life, I'm not like that in my professional life because I know it's not going to get me where I would need to go. One of my biggest career breaks came when a coworker turned down a temporary and international assignment in China. I was working at Fox. They had a distribution relationship with CCTV, which is the state-run media organization. And Fox offered to help them rebuild their digital web and on-air presence for their English language channel. So they have, many different channels like BBC, but then one is specific to English language. And it was a project that was going to be a significant amount of work, extra work on top of what I was already doing. It would be several trips to China over the course of a year. And there were aspects of the project that were just a little bit daunting, a little bit scary and overwhelming, particularly for me at that time. I was, I think, at the manager level in my career. But because I said yes, and did a good job, of course, that became a stepping stone to many other opportunities in my career. It put me on the radar of more senior leadership. It put me on the radar of HR that repped multiple divisions within the organization. And then they were able to put me forward for 2 additional international assignments. And, one of those being the most challenging and rewarding in my career, which was going over to London to work at the Times and Sunday Times and launch a digital paywall for them. Paywalls are very commonplace now, but that was really the first large general interest newspaper to launch a digital subscription model. I'm going to pause and make sure that I'm not frozen. Okay, I see people moving now.
You're good.
So, first and foremost, you just have to raise your hand and say yes, and know that those aren't going to be part of your day-to-day job. It's going to be it's going to be on top of what you're already doing. The second one, and I'll be more brief, but you have to be commercial. And by that, I mean, you have to be revenue focused. And, I'm going to make the assumption that most of the people on the call here work for a for-profit industry. And the reality is that if your work doesn't contribute to driving revenue, it's not going to get the attention of senior leadership. You may be very fulfilled and it may get the attention of your boss and you may get a congrats, but you have to speak the C-suite's language if you want their attention, right? So focusing on things like, how did you reduce customer acquisition costs? How did you increase lifetime value? How did you reduce operational expenses? That's the language and the focus that you need to have. And a lot of us sort of are uncomfortable doing that, right? Merchandising our work or managing up. And we reserve that for our resume, but you really have to do that every single day and sort of fight for your visibility. And then lastly, I'll say you have to become indispensable. Whenever I move to another job, there's always 1 or 2 people that I'm desperate to poach and I want to take with me because they're indispensable. And one way that in retrospect, I can see really worked for me is I'm not a graphic designer, but I can use Photoshop and PowerPoint and Keynote and video editing software and those types of things. And so I raised my hand to take on some mundane presentation assignments. And then I became the PowerPoint guy. And while that's very boring, suddenly you're the PowerPoint guy sitting in the president's office working on the 5-year strat plan. And you never would have had access to those people or that information if you hadn't raised your hand. So I'm not saying go out and figure out how to do PowerPoint. I'm saying figure out what your unique skills are and how you can use those to maneuver yourself into a good position.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff, Jody. Yeah, Tony, you?
Certainly. Thanks so much. You know, I think there are 3 points to kind of how I think about my career, how I think about assisting others that are trying to find their track. So the 3 points look more like this. And to Jody's point, closed mouths don't get fed. So it's important to raise your hand. It's important that you're very clear in your goals. You're very clear in your recommendations and your prescription. And you cannot be that executive that waits for someone to come up with a great answer. You know what? Not every answer that you'll provide is going to be the right answer, but at least you were vocal. At least you were very clear. And I always say, you want to make sure with your executive leadership that you have an understanding before there's a misunderstanding. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. Closed mouths don't get fed. That is the truth. Second, master your craft. Being a marketer, being a strategist, being chief revenue officer today or someday for you, master your craft. Learning never stops. I've spent an entire career, what I call curating what I do, curating my career, carefully selecting those attributes that can be of value not only to me but to others. But it's really important that you master your craft and you're constantly learning. You can never hit the snooze button. If your goal is a C-level executive position, you never stop mastering your craft. You learn something new and you learn it and you learn it and you learn it till you feel that you put your 10,000 hours in, and then you curate, move to the next thing that you don't know a lot about, but you know it's going to be important to the C-suite. And lastly, I look at things, and we might talk a little bit more throughout the session about this, but I look at what I call a career car. Drive your career car thoughtfully, okay? What I mean by that is one day when you do become a CMO, and we've all been there, you want your CEO to be a partner in the front seat, sitting right next to you. Because there are times that, you want to turn right, and the CEO says, well, I've been on that road on the right, but I'm not quite sure about what happens if I turn left, but maybe you might want to do that. It's a strong recommendation. I think it's so important that your executive leader is sitting next to you on the journey. What you don't want is to be in a position in your car where your CEO is in the back seat. And you know what happens when they're in the back seat? They're whispering in your ear. They want to grab the wheel. You're hitting the brake. You're hitting the gas. It's a nightmare, okay? And then it gets even worse, and I'm slightly facetious about this. All of a sudden, 2 or 3 other people get into the back seat, and you're in the front seat all by yourself, driving along, people in your ear, someone's grabbing the wheel, and before you know it, you've lost control of where you're trying to go, how you're going to get there, okay? So drive your career car carefully, and there are going to be times that you have to stop the car and tell some folks to get out. Be very clear, here's where we're going, here's how we're going to get there, and I need my C-level leader back in the front seat with me. Or you'll end up with a clown car, and that's not what you want.
Oh, that's great, Tony. Good stuff. Heather?
I love that.
Yeah.
What Jody and Tony shared is so part of my journey, and I couldn't agree with them more. A couple other things that I would just share with you. As you get up, it becomes about leadership, and you need to motivate and inspire a team to make things happen. And one of the things that I heard from a CEO that was a great mentor and partner of mine is always be willing to surround yourself with experts that know their discipline better than you. Because if you can make that collaboration and that high performing team work, then that helps you as you move up. So as you get to the CMO, often it's less about that individual expertise, and it's more about how you can lead a team to deliver to the goals and objectives of the company and be that, that advocate, that person at that table that's able to guide that. The other thing I would share with you is as I've navigated through my career and made changes, and I spent time, dedicated time at certain places in my career in certain companies. And so it felt overwhelming to have the courage to say yes to something new. But I looked at it in 4 key things. And to what Jody said, it wasn't about the title and it wasn't about the pay. If you're the best, those things come. But for me, it was about being able to do meaningful work that I really believed in, that I felt like I could make a difference, that I wanted to get up in the morning and do. It was about leadership, which was critical to me, and that filled my soul and was something that I want to be the best of the best at. It's about obviously creating value for my family. And then the last thing, it was about learning. And I think those that I've seen that have been able to move through, and what my experience was always being willing to go into the unknown and learn something new and not get stuck just trying to protect. It's like that growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. The executives are looking for people to say yes and to charter through the unknown. And every time you charter through the unknown, you pick up all the trades to be able to do that even better the next time. So I think it's having that courage to say yes in things that you might not have done before. And it sort of builds out your whole resume to be able to then do something new.
Yeah, all 3. I mean, just what great. I'm putting notes down here, and I mean, if I can summarize it, it's speak up. Tony, I love what you said about closed mouths don't get fed. And Jody, you had kind of made a comment to that too. Leadership. Make thoughtful career choices and have that courage. And I think one of the things about making thoughtful career choices is, as I look at the participants on this call, there's actually people I've talked to where they're like, hey, I'm thinking about this. Do you think that's a good idea? And if you take a position, know that is part of your journey, and how you explain that journey, or how you explain that decision further down on your journey. I mean, that all has to make sense. And so, being very thoughtful and, taking a position out just because it pays a little bit more money, or going here just because it does that. I mean, and you're just kind of blowing in the wind. From everything that I've heard here, it's just, that's the absolute wrong thing to do. So thank you all three very much. We're going to throw another question up here. One of the topics that we discussed in our prep call was an MBA. Okay. And it was, a very, pretty polarizing topic, I thought. And so, obviously the elephant in the room, in the current state is COVID, right? And so, many marketers have, lost their jobs, but really looking for a way for them to kind of stay in the game. And I've actually gotten a lot of questions about an MBA and whether or not it's worth it. So we're just going to ask all the panelists here to kind of share their thoughts on an MBA. And is it something that you use when you're evaluating a candidate? And so, Tony, you've been the middle person so far, so we'll start with you.
All right. I think an MBA is appropriate for those in very specific industries. But in my personal, I think, experience, I actually started, I'm a St. Thomas grad. So my point of view was, I want to, I said it again, I want to curate my career. I want to create a career that really communicates who I am, how I go about life. Because I always say that work is only what you do. It's not who you are. So in that sense, I wanted to curate my career. And so instead of, moving towards an MBA, the thought was, let me pull together those experiences that enabled me to be miles wide and miles deep versus miles wide and inches deep. And I believe there are opportunities that you have to take because it's a moment in time and you're like, okay, this is something I want to do. But even when you do it, look at it as one more point of light in your curation. As you go through your career, you're going to add these experiences and these roles, and you'll find that, oh, that role that I had a lot of experience around data mining, disparate data, that really helps me when I start to look at this particular role. Or if there's an opportunity for you to work, in communications, specifically in public relations, you're like, okay, that's an area that I might not be strong in, but this is going to be a useful experience for me as I move towards my ultimate goal. So I really believe that I think it's not necessary to have an MBA, but it's important that you, again, master your craft. You're highly capable, highly intelligent, and extremely strong as a marketer, as a data scientist, as a revenue mind generating talent. So my point of view is build the right curation strategy, and that at times will supersede a need for the MBA. And again, there are some areas where finance and other, practice areas where an MBA is important.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point of view.
Yeah. Heather, we'll go to you and we'll end with Jody.
Yeah. I think exactly what Tony's saying. As you curate all of your experiences, an MBA might be a way to gain some expertise and experience that navigates you through. I chose not to. I felt my MBA was actually at 25 going to Australia and starting a division of a company down there. And walking in with a 90-day contract with one bank and looking to become their agency of record, and then spending 4 years there. To me, that was where I got all the experience. Like, how do you set up a company, and how do you manage this, that, and the other? So I felt like that was my MBA. If I hadn't had that, then I might have looked to say, gosh, maybe I do want to go back. I think we talked earlier, it's not something I'd recommend doing right away. Get some experience so that you can really apply it. It is one tool in your tool set. And there are certain companies that you probably need it. But in my career, I've never found that held me back. And when I look at resumes, I think it's a good thing. I don't ever say that's a negative, but I look to their experience and the journey they've been on and how they've built their expertise and all that they're doing. Based on that, it's not as much as the line that tells me the MBA.
Great. Jody?
Yeah, I concur with Heather and Tony. It completely depends on your situation and the door that you're trying to open. I chose to get an MBA because I didn't feel that I was well-rounded. I was working in the entertainment industry, which is very, very different than other industries like consumer packaged goods, right? You're not doing a ton of focus groups or research. You're not putting a physical product on the shelf and working with those types of distributors. You're not doing things like pricing analysis. And I could see aspects of marketing that peers were exposed to that I wanted to be exposed to, and I knew I wouldn't get that in my industry. So to Tony's point, I just wanted more breadth. And I sort of wanted a plan B for the future. If I ever decide to pivot into another area, how am I going to do that at 35 years old if I've never conducted customer research, as just an example. So I think my MBA did those things. However, I did not choose a top tier school. And because of that, it didn't open certain doors. And so if you're looking, to work at, the top 50 companies in the country or the world, or even certain parts of the country, the East Coast seems to be more fixated on MBAs than the Midwest, for example. Then you also have to think about not only how much time am I going to invest, but how much money am I going to invest, and what's the sort of quality of the school. But again, it's really based on your own personal path and your own personal goals. And then I would concur with Heather. This is a difficult statement because, listen, we all have different life circumstances, but I also would not recommend doing it straight after your undergrad. I do think you need those practical experiences in business to be able to apply the learnings to. And conversely, I think it's very difficult to do much later where you've got, 3 kids underfoot, or you're taking care of your parents or something. So it's very challenging to find the sweet spot.
Jody, one of the things that I do think the MBA gives you is a network. Like, all of a sudden you're with other people that have a similar interest. Have you found that part? That's always the one that I've been interested in, is like, how has that influenced your career and having the network of your graduate class or the school? Yeah,
I did not. And I did not have a great network. And I think that was also a function of the type of program that I chose. I have I have friends that went to Duke, for example, and while it was not a full-time program, they were living in LA, you know, they did intensives on the weekends, and they formed a much deeper relationship with their classmates. And, you know, I think the quality of that school combined with how the program was structured, they came out with a fantastic alumni network, which that alone can be worth every penny of the investment.
Right.
Yeah, if there's one piece, you know, that I might add, and what I tell people is like, if you're going to do it, do it. And I think one of the things that I've heard from everybody is, I mean, similar to how like in the recruitment space, I have clients that say, hey, I want somebody from that company, right? Because they know they hire great people, they know they train them very well, and so there's a certain pedigree that comes along with recruiting people from XYZ companies, and the same goes for your MBA. Right. I mean, if you're we talked about East Coast, West Coast, if you're going to go to Wharton or you're going to go to Kellogg or, you know, whatever, you know, people, you know, big companies know, oh, wow, okay, they train people very, very well. Or, you know, Carlson here or St. Thomas in Minneapolis. Excuse me. If you're going to do it, you know, go big, get the biggest school, the best name, the biggest brand that you can possibly get and go at it that way.
And Wes, I think you bring up a really important point, like be all in. So any of these things you do, the more you give, the more you get. And if you're just trying to do it on the side and it's some night classes, you're probably not going to get the full benefit of it. And so you have to invest as much, whatever that learning mode or that, you know, growth mode that you're trying to take on. I think you just need to jump in 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, great, Pete. So as we're kind of going through a couple of questions, one housekeeping note here, you know, for all of the attendees, we're going to just pop up a question just as far as what was the interest in attending, you know, this webinar and this panel. So Edwin, if you don't mind, if you want to throw up that question, just kind of a Q&A as far as, you know, what you were looking to get out of it. You know, we just want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the people that that are attending as well. So when you get a moment, Edwin, if you want to throw that up, and we'll kind of have that as a sidebar and we'll continue here. You know, we just kind of talked about, you know, COVID being the elephant in the room as everyone's on a virtual webinar. We really want to talk about how COVID has changed marketing. And not just marketing from a, you know, current company standpoint, but how you manage remote teams, and how, you know, how you're interviewing remotely, and just really how the thing is, how it's just changed holistically. So if you don't mind, and we're going to, you know, kind of go through the panelists here and just share, you know, maybe one, maybe two things that's really impacted you the most, that COVID has changed your day-to-day. And so we'll start with Heather on this one.
Yeah. So let me just give you context at Deluxe, what we were going through. We were doing sort of one of those exercises around organizational design. And on Monday, the marketing organization went through that, and we lost about 20% of our team, and we flattened the organization. We spread the span of control of the leaders. So the makeup of the organization changed. And on Thursday, we made the announcement that we all needed to move home. So some people haven't even met their new manager, and all of a sudden everybody picks up their laptop and heads home, and we haven't returned, and we probably won't return this year, from everything I read. So it was a chasm change. And then everything that we were planning from a marketing organization changed because we needed to respond to COVID, and many of our products were no longer relevant. And so, you know, we shifted 50% of our DMA spend in that second quarter away from those products that really weren't relevant, and then had to lean into other products. So you can just imagine, oh my gosh, my manager has changed, the dynamics of my business. I can't just do what I did yesterday. And a couple things that became really important for us, it was about the connection and the communication. And so one of the things we did as a marketing leadership team is we stood up a daily 8:30 to 9 call, where we just touch base, what's going on. We also stood up that every week or every other week, we would get the entire marketing team together and just share the journey and make sure that we were being as transparent as possible. And I think what I learned through COVID is that intentional leadership of communication, transparency, understanding people were on some journeys with mental health, just with their families and the dynamics of that changing, and having grace in that time became a really important thing that I needed to lean into. The other thing that really helped us is creating purpose for the team. So as COVID happened, marketing became the epicenter of how you responded and what you did. And we had just launched a brand that said we were champions for business, both big and small, so communities could thrive. So our team went all in to create the COVID Center that was on the brand new website we had just launched, and really to be able to give advice and encouragement to small businesses of what to do during this time and then how to recover. And what I found is when we had meaningful work and there was purpose and we felt like we were going to have outcomes, we shattered some of the silos that we had had in the past because we had a common goal that we were all working for, and it was unknown. We didn't know how to get there, and we had to work across. So COVID to me expedited some of my team dynamics that I never expected. But then it also caused new strain in that you couldn't walk down the hall. You couldn't find those people and sort of encourage the culture in that way. And you had to find new ways. The last thing I'll share with you, at the start of it, we didn't use video. We just did it all voice. And I found we were probably 6 weeks into it, and you could just feel this cultural disconnection happening. And so one of the changes I made is I said, we're all putting video on. Like, we just need to see each other. I can't tell you how much that changed the dynamic of the team when all of a sudden you needed to be there. And it didn't matter if you were in your baseball cap or the hair was back in a ponytail, but I could see you, I could read you. And then, so much comes from our visual of understanding people's intentions and things like that. So those are probably the couple things that I saw in COVID that I look back and I'm so grateful for in that time. And I think my team is tighter and probably moved in that high performing state so much faster than we would have if Monday we had changed the org and then we let that trickle through the months ahead without COVID.
Yeah. That's really great. Again, I'm taking notes here, so that's really good stuff. We'll turn over to you.
You say Tony or Jody?
Sorry, Wes, did you say Jody or Tony?
Either one. I said Jody, but we can do either one.
Tony, I'll defer to you.
All right, I'll run with it. Thank you so much. Heather talks about, the things that were expedited, from the impact of COVID. And I'll come from my personal point of view, and there are three particular elements. But, personally, for the last, I'd probably say 15 years, but specifically the last 5, I travel 500,000 miles a year, air travel. And my wife reminded me, she said, last year you did just over 8,532 miles in rental cars. So that puts it in perspective, because my own car only had 965 miles on it for the year. So when COVID hit, it was a complete hit the brakes on the road trip. And then of course we move into, Zoom, team meetings, Outlooks. And then at the end of the day, with the clients that I serve that are really in the areas of distribution, manufacturing, pure business to business, what was expedited are 3 very specific areas: digital modernization, transformational business operations, and something I put into place with every single entity I've worked with globally is what we call trust targeting. And just briefly for each, digital modernization, believe it or not, in the business to business world, and especially in the industrial side, they're not really known for being super savvy. Not everybody's a Granger. Not everybody is some of these brands that you recognize in the B2B space. And many of these entities sort of said, well, we've got a decent website. Well, that was 3 years ago. And we've been banging on your door to say, there's some things you need to change about how you go to market. Well, all of a sudden, you can't wait anymore, because everything is e-commerce driven. Everything's driven through a portal. Everything is now related to some sort of disparate data, so you understand your customer, what funnel they sit in, and how you have to, work with them virtually. So it is now in the B2B space forced to have to modernize, and that's a lot of change for an organization. And that's when you get into transformational business ops. You might have multiple warehouses. You might have all sorts of channel strategies that don't make sense anymore. And so COVID is forcing you to think about how you work not only on your business, but how you work in your business. And then lastly, trust targeting. It's a challenge for every company. Not every company has had team members working remotely. You know, it was even last year I had conversations with clients that, you know, kind of thought people that worked out of the side of the office, they would question it. Well, you know, why do I want to get that person a laptop? I think we all have heard that. Well, I don't think they should have a laptop. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, at some point in time, you need to run this like Air Force One. You got to run a multi-billion-dollar company from anywhere on this planet and not touch it. And that's what's happened. So when you put in trust targeting, it's you need to now start to learn trust. The work is going to get done. And again, as we talk about becoming a CMO or a CRO or head of strategy, how you interact with your teams, you know, Jody and Heather both know leadership that is virtual is challenging because at the end of the day, you've got people that can't see each other physically. You're not in conference rooms anymore. You're not passing by in the parking lot or parking ramp or elevator. So you have to start leveling in the trust level. You have to start targeting executives that have probably been challenged with remote and get them to the point where they understand that this is what it's going to be. And it might not be temporary. It might be for a business purpose longer than that. So, you know, those are three areas that I think, you know, COVID has really accelerated change in organizations. And I think it's exciting. I think it's exciting for everyone because now the conversations that used to be really hard to have to be had now. You can't avoid them.
Tony, I just add one more thing to that. Like, we were sort of fearful that if you couldn't be in an office, you couldn't work for our company. Like the remote workforce is like, oh, I don't know about that. And we own a lot more property than we need to. And so COVID, everybody went home and all of a sudden we found out we can work remote and we can be even more productive than we were. And so we've shut 30% of our offices completely forever. Like we've reduced our footprint down. And the beauty is all those people probably in our old scenario, we would have thought about packaging them out and figuring out how you move them into the offices that we're going to stay. And now it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Found a way.
And thanks, Heather. That's that transformational business operation.
Mm-hmm.
This has forced a whole new way of looking at your business.
Yeah.
That will not ever change now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jody, and I want to preface too. So Jody, I'll let you answer the question, and then we'll get into you know, kind of that same point with working remotely. You know, the next topic is I know what a lot of people are interested in as well, which is obviously the employer-driven market that we're in right now, which kind of ties into this. So Jody, I'll let you kind of answer this question, and we'll jump into the next one as well.
Sure. I mean, I think my experiences or my team's experiences are very similar to what Heather and Tony mentioned, right? We had many comms out in the market that were suddenly inappropriate, and everything had to be sort of tossed aside and revised. The one additive thing that I'll say is that COVID is a crisis, and we've experienced other crises over the last several months, right? The murder of George Floyd is another that impacted, you know, both our customers and our own employees. And I think it's super important that as a marketing team and as a lead, we have a contingency plan in place, right? That we're not trying to create a crisis communications plan on the fly. And I was thankful actually from an MBA course where we sort of went through, you know, companies historically, case studies that have done a good job in a crisis and companies who have not. And we had a little bit of a framework to work from, you know, knowing sort of the basics of, you know, be authentic, you know, be trustworthy, over communicate with your customers. And so we had a framework to go into all of these sort of crisis communications that marketing departments find themselves at the center of the storm. So that's just one additional piece of advice on top of what Heather and Tony mentioned.
Jody, I think it's interesting because we've gone from like COVID crisis to the new norm.
Yeah.
Which is just, you know, often the crisis you get back to where you were. And I think in this world, we'll never go back. This is a new norm that evolves.
Yeah. I, for one, I've always been an in-office person, right? Old school, you know, love the water cooler stuff. I had worked at home, but I had never worked from home. And I think they're two very, very different things. Oh, yeah. And so right away, I absolutely hated it. I'm telling you, like, I absolutely hated working from But as you can see, like I got my Fathead whiteboard wall that I got on discount because I got my Buckeye one. So you just adapt, right? It's one of those things where now it's kind of like, okay, I've hit my groove. And when you start going back in the office, it's gonna be like, well, who are you guys? I mean, this is weird. Like I got my routine down. So just kind of a personal story. But I do want to kind of jump into, again, the environment that we're in, and a lot of people, as we're looking at career growth and career change, a lot of people were negatively impacted, through this crisis, as we've talked about. So, 6 months ago, I was talking to people about how this was the most candidate-driven market I had ever, since being a recruiter, that I had ever witnessed. And it is the complete inverse right now. So, what sort of advice would you give to, people applying for positions? Because now, where there used to be, 20 applicants, there's, 300, right? And so how would you, kind of give tips and tricks and advice on how to kind of stand out above the crowd? And Jody, you've been, bringing up the rear last couple of times, so I'll let you kick it off here.
Sure. I mean, Wes, you can probably confirm this particular talking point better than some of us as panelists, because you really have your pulse on what's happening in the recruiting space. But, Tony mentioned this. I think the bright side of the situation is senior management finally woke up and realized we can all do our jobs remotely. And Heather said that as well. I don't think we have any intention, hopefully our CEO is not going to kill me, but I don't think we have any intention of fully going back to the office, or to Heather's point, buying more real estate for the company to expand. So I'm hoping candidates will have a much better shot at applying for jobs in all parts of the country. And while they might not be 100% remote, they might be 70% remote or 80% remote. Where it's a limited amount of time away from the family, and you can really pursue things outside of Minneapolis. And Wes, are you seeing that?
That's a really great question. I think it still depends. I mean, it really, really does. The old saying is it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, and there are still certain individuals and organizations that are saying yes. We're going to have a distributed workforce, right now, but at the end of the day, we do want somebody to come back into the office, and maybe they just have long office leases or something. I don't really know, but I also think it really depends upon where you are in the country, and I genuinely mean that. I work with a lot of organizations out on the East Coast as well, and they've already gotten orders that don't expect to come in before Q3 of 2021, right? And so I think it's a really bad answer, but I think it does depend, right? But just know at the same time too, companies that are going to hire people that work remotely want a track record of success from people that are working remotely. So if you are applying for a fully remote position, one piece of advice that I would give people is to make sure that you highlight the successes that you've had as a remote employee. Okay, it's one thing that you can absolutely do to separate yourself, because if you've done it before, it's more likely that you're going to do it again. So just highlight that.
Yeah. The two pieces of advice I would give: one, network. I lived in LA for 15 years. It's the mecca of networking. I affectionately call it a very symbiotic community. A lot of people are your friends because you can get them somewhere, but it works for that city. And, as Wes said, if you're the hiring manager and you have 300 or 400 resumes to go through, that is very challenging to cut through with a piece of paper. If you have a mistake on that, you're kind of dead in the water, right? So I think you have to find a way to network your way into that company and get your resume on that person's desk. And, even if it didn't get you noticed the first time, when it comes down to the final 2 or 3 candidates, the tie's going to go to the person that you have a connection with or that has the strongest references. So you have to take time to keep your network up. You can't just start doing it once the crisis happens and you're out of a job. You have to keep that network up at all times. And then the other piece is you have to be a good interviewer. I would highly recommend that everybody look up the Amazon interview question set. And, not a lot of companies use that verbatim, but
Yep.
it's pretty easy to find on the web, but it will make you a better interviewer and rethink how you approach your talk track and how you answer questions in a much deeper way.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Tony, any other insight?
I concur with all the comments that the panelists have made. I think, Wes, one thing that you pointed out is, highlight your experience working remotely. Again, take it from someone that, we were talking in our prep conversations. I have 2 Zoom rooms. I got a Zoom room and I've got a Teams room, and everything is set up in separate rooms. And I've had that for years. So I think it's important because this is, it might be the next, I call it, this is the next economy.
Mm-hmm.
This is how the world's going to be. It won't be normal. It'll be next, that's for sure. But it's important that you highlight your ability and your experience of managing satellite teams. And as a marketer, how often are we dealing with outside vendors that are working on different, attributes of our strategy? I think you really have to highlight that you've managed distributed services, and you've managed teams, and you've managed project managers who are probably spread all over the world. I think it's really important to note that it's your expansiveness in being virtual is going to be what stands out moving forward. Because if you haven't done it before, the question comes, well, can that talent manage an external team that is out of country, out of state? I have an orange here, so I've got that fruit fly for my orange. And so I just think it's important. I think lastly is don't be afraid to take a look at your resume and take a step back and say, okay, I don't have some of these skills. And while you are trying to move to the next, opportunity, try to pick up some of those skills along the way. Get on more webinars, get involved in more learning opportunities virtually so that you can up your game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add one, and then Heather, we'll kind of go to you. That continuous improvement piece. We talked about an MBA earlier. It doesn't always have to be an MBA, right? I mean, it's all about telling that story. And if you're saying, hey, you know what? I was impacted by COVID, but then you know what? I really used that time to gain a couple of certifications or do a couple of things that I had been putting off. Right? Because, we talk about the difference between working in the business and working on the business, right? And so when you're working for a company, you're so busy working in your day-to-day that you don't have time to work on the business, which is getting those additional, like I said, certifications or anything. So, I mean, all of that tells that story. And if you show the initiative that you're doing some things, during a global pandemic that other people aren't, you're really, separating yourself. So.
Well, it's the only thing I would add. I'd really lean in on that networking side. And I'll just tell you, when I spent a decade at Hallmark, and Hallmark's out of Kansas City, I was working out of Minneapolis. Their B2B division was here in Minneapolis. I didn't spend a lot of time networking. One, I thought, my career path is going to be here forever. And I was just so in the business and in my family and all the dynamics that were happening in my life that when I had that courageous choice to make, to leave and go career path in a different place, I felt like I was nervous. I didn't have enough. And so one of the changes I made right then is that I was always going to say yes to the call. And I was really going to focus on that networking time. And right now we're hiring people in strategic positions, but the people that are getting through to me are the ones that have networked, that know somebody that knows me. And I would just ask all of us to be open to those calls, because we all need to help each other in the journey as we go along. But how you show up at that call really helps you either get to the next call where I'm leading you to the right person that might be able to help you or getting you in that, or it's just that one call. So you really want to think about what's the purpose of that? What's your end in mind as you have that? And you can do them virtually. We don't always have to do it over coffee. So I think that's a change agent, but I think that networking side is just so critical right now.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too with networking, and what I find is people are really wanting to help, right? Mm-hmm. and kind of be that person. So what I always say is the rule of thumb is and people have probably heard me say this before, but it's one coffee a month. Even if you're employed right now, like even if you have a job, I'm not looking, I'm not doing, find one person every single month, call it like the third Thursday of every single month, to where you're meeting with somebody new, you're expanding your network. Being a recruiter, I'm a professional networker. I mean, that's it, right? So, I mean, that I don't, as long as you're hooking yourself up to other people that have larger networks and you make a good impression, you're doing yourself a favor. So that's really, really great. So we're getting to 9 o'clock here, and we got a couple of things. And one thing I think is going to be a really, really, really great piece, and I want to talk about it before we lose time, is really just the role of the CMO and the marketing executive, and how not only it's changed in the last 5 years, but where we potentially see it going in the next 5 years as well. And so I just wanted, at a high level, and during the prep call, this was just, we were just talking, this was just a really fun topic, because we talked about data and we talked about technology and information and, all that kind of stuff. So I don't really want to kind of pick and choose who wants to go, but just would love for the three of you to just kind of share thoughts on where it's been and where we're going.
I'll go, very briefly. We're talking about, what's the path to the CMO role. And what's interesting, and I know both Jody and Heather can concur, the CMO role isn't what you think it is. It's not just leading marketing. You are leading an entire organization. You're driving M&A. You're driving revenue. You're driving customer engagement. Marketing is an aspect of all of these things, but at the end of the day, in a CMO role, your carton of eggs are very different, and they're each colorful, and it's not just marketing. So don't focus on, I want to be this really great marketer. Now, you got to be really good at finance. You got to be really good at data, and you got to be really good at strategy. You got to be really good at communicating and organizing your thoughts, so that you can tell your story and it's believable and it's embraced. So I think it's important, as you think about CMO, don't let the title itself limit your thinking. It's a big responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tony, I concur. Like, I think the muscle you need to have in business strategy is as important. Yeah. What I have found just in my current experience with Deluxe is really being customer centric and being that leading voice about the customer and what their needs are and how we meet those needs. That's where I feel like I show up at the table different, or at a different value than maybe the others that are at the table, is putting that customer at the center. Because we have several divisions and they all have different customers that they're going after, but we need to get on top of that and say, okay, but what is the overall value that we're driving for that customer and how we do it? So that's been pretty critical for me.
Yeah, I would say the role is much more technical and much more data driven. And that's a good thing, right? Everything is trackable now. Everything is accountable. In some ways, you have to be much more frugal and do more with less. You have to be able to justify every dollar that you're spending. And I remember being early in my career and thinking that, when I got to be the CMO, I'd be in charge of PR and working with the agencies and doing the beautiful on-air spots. And the reality is that those activities are still happening, but I'm not spending that much time on those projects. More than 50% of my time is discussing data and the tech stack and customer journeys and why all the back end plumbing is broken. And so you have to be very comfortable with technology, and as a result, much more accountable for your decision making. Now, the piece that's good about that, as Tony alluded to, I think I've battled for years, as many of us have, is to ensure that the marketing team isn't seen as the party planning department, or that they're not just seen as a cost center by finance, that they are seen as a strategic seat at the table. And that's the piece that's so important, is not just having the title, but having a seat at the table where you're part of the strategic decision-making process of the company. And that comes back to being data-driven, being commercial, being revenue-focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jody, you bring up a really great point, and it hits a little bit, well, really close to home. Working with a client right now who, 27-year-old company, never had more than a field marketer, event marketer, because the only thing that they saw, the only investment they made in marketing was they went to 10 trade shows a year. Well,
Yep.
nobody can go to trade shows right now. And so, they're looking at it as opposed to looking at marketing as an expense. They're now, looking at it as, and this is an investment that we need to take, and it's time, it's money, it's resources. And I think somebody mentioned earlier that, COVID has really forced the hand of a lot of organizations to do something that we've, probably seen coming for a long time, but just too, blind and to realize it. Right. And I think so that's something that definitely hits very, very close to home. So, and you talked about data. One of the things in Scott Brinker of Chief Martech, if you guys don't follow him, he's definitely somebody that I would check out. He posted a poll, and I was going to screenshot it and save it, but I obviously forgot to. It just popped up on my LinkedIn feed. But Scott Brinker, he's out in Boston, and he runs a site called Chief Martech. And it's all about marketing and technology. And he polled 500 marketing executives on where their budget is going right now. And it's events, it's paid search, it's all that kind of stuff. And before COVID and now COVID, in the one area that changed the most, it was the I don't know. It was the I don't know section of before it was 10% of my budget is I don't know. Now it's 27% of my budget is I don't know. So it was a really cool thing. So he's a really good follow. Excuse me, if you're in the if you're looking for marketing and technology. So we have just a couple of things. We had a lot of really, really good engagement on kind of the chat, and I apologize for not kind of jumping into it earlier. Hopefully you found value in the conversation, but wanted just to go back into kind of something that somebody said earlier. I'll just read a comment. So I dropped out of my MBA program and switched to a master's in theology and philosophy. To Tony's point, my years of experience, plus having a master's in something very non-traditional, provides something unique. I have found it has sparked more interesting conversations due to the fact that it stands out. And it had a benefit of being something that I wanted to do as opposed to something that I thought I needed to do. So that's a really good kind of insight, from the crowd, on the MBA. And I'll also share, actually, you know what, before we share some kind of success stories, one of the things that was a common theme when we had talked about how COVID has really changed marketing were the topics of one, being adaptability, okay? 2, focus on your customers, and 3, understanding just opportunities that weren't there before. Was there any insights, or just maybe one of you want to expand on, kind of adaptability or customers, or maybe some, examples that you've used during COVID that have touched on one of those 3 topics?
I'd probably just throw out 2 examples that I saw. One was, as COVID happened, we needed to get out to our customers and really support them in a time that was so unprecedented. And creating our COVID Solution Center and all the different things that we did from a marketing presence to really be there for our customers and provide them the insights. We knew that it wasn't going to drive revenue right away, but we wanted to support them. And I can't believe how many things we stood up, from a podcast to a community center to a video series that we were doing, to a whole nother level of blogging, to taking products from across our solution set and bringing them together based on customer needs. It was one of those sort of chasm leaps for us in really getting to lean into a lot of new things, where in the past, we sometimes were encumbered by the year over year. And we get down to the day over day, and sometimes we get down to the morning versus the afternoon. And it was a gift to sort of throw that all out and say, gosh, you can't look at that anymore. So I found that we were really leaning into different marketing tools that each were telling the story in a little bit different way and expanding our reach that we hadn't done before. And then the second one that I would just share was part of our portfolio of offering is promotional products for trade shows. So you can imagine how relevant that was mid-March and still today. So what do? You know, it's a huge part of our portfolio in our promotional space. But our leader there leaned in and said, gosh, there's all these PPE needs out there. Why don't we go find that product and leverage the same channels that we had to deliver that? And he really turned it on its head. And we were able to find a customer need. You couldn't get access, whether it was the masks or the gloves or the scrubs or whatever, be able to pull that together and then deliver that to our clients. And especially in our channel partners, where they were really scared of not having revenue from the traditional products that they sold, this gave them a whole new avenue. And we as marketers were able to surround that and build out that marketing plan and the enablement tools to really deliver on that. And I thought it was just this great moment of seeing a market need, responding to it, and leveraging the things that we had done in the past to deliver on that.
We had a very similar situation. So we serve, 35,000 youth sports organizations, more than 1 million teams. And you can imagine anybody that had planned for spring sports, it was a complete stop down. And so we had to pivot very quickly, both for our customers and just the youth audience that we serve. So on sportsengine.com, we launched a whole microsite section that was devoted to letting those organizations post virtual workouts or virtual drills or virtual skills and programs that people could sign up for. We also are in partnership with NBC hosting NBC Sports Camp, which is a whole series of workouts with former Olympians and professional athletes that you can do on a daily and weekly basis. We knew that parents were going crazy with their kids underfoot. And so we just posted activities in partnership with other NBC divisions of, just things that you can do to help keep your kids healthy, active, and busy outside. So, and to Heather's point, not all of this was going to make a ton of money, but we wanted a way to stay engaged with our customers and try and make this less painful for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
I was going to say, from my perspective, as I've worked with companies, everyone is in the same position. Everyone is, for the first time in American history and global history, we're all on the same page because we're not able to be together. And I think it's important, as I tell companies, it's important to focus on your customer. It's actually doubly important to focus on your team and your employees, because they have to deliver that brand, and they got to land the brand, they got to drive those outcomes, and they have to do it with a lot of stress. So it's important that, companies, and if you're looking to move into a different organization, that they take very seriously the psychological impact, the emotional impact, and all those areas that are what we might call unseen, that are important to the employee. They need to feel embraced, loved, and recognized, especially during this time. Mm-hmm. So I think, I spend a lot of time working with CEOs and boards to help them understand that, yes, we got to hit that EBITDA metric, but it's really important that our people are what drives the business. Let's not leave them behind.
Yeah, Tony, you bring up just such a great point. In my space, I've talked to more frustrated employees because 10% of the marketing team or 20% of the marketing team got let go, and the work doesn't change. I mean, you're still doing the same amount of work. There's just now less people to do it. And so making sure that if you're a marketing leader, that you appreciate, the people that are in your company that are there, and not the woe is me. And I mean, you have to be the person bringing everybody up and showing them that they're appreciated. That is such a huge piece, because okay, let's say you do all of a sudden let go of 20% of your people, 20% of your people. Well, you want to make sure that you keep the other 80%. You can't lose anybody else, or you're having to backfill them. So it's such a very important piece to keep those people. And we're not quite done yet. I just one more housekeeping note. I mentioned it earlier, but before you leave, Edwin's going to actually throw up that poll that I had mentioned earlier about the main interest in joining the discussion today. So we did lose a couple of people, from the beginning, but if you want to fill that out again, we just want to make sure that we're, touching on the most relevant topics, that everybody's joining for today. So if you want to, take a moment to kind of fill that out, I do appreciate it. And other than that, so I did want to share a couple of just sort of comments. We had talked about, what is a COVID, marketing accomplishment that you are proud of. So I just wanted to go through the chat here and read a couple of these. So one, COVID has forced me to focus even more on telling the stories of our customers. Nobody cares what our brand has to say, but if we can give our customers the platform to brag about their business, that's a huge win for us. And wow, like that's absolutely. I mean, that's. I just read that, so I didn't know if it was going to be good. That was really good. Another one here. So landed a research and content ideation consulting position with a large organization trying to educate customers on the risk of downloading pirated content. Another one, we just launched the Health Passport and Contact Tracing app for schools and businesses. It replaces spreadsheet tracking and gives a daily health assessment for employees. Very cool. So those are just a couple of really good wins. Edwin, did I miss any ones that you might have caught that you wanted to kind of bring up before we jump into the Q&A by chance?
No, I think you got it all. The one point that came to me, and I think Tony mentioned it, he said, you have to be really good at data. And it's probably easier said than done. Everybody will agree with it, but at the same time, data is sometimes hard to get to. It's not always as clean as you want it to be. Could the panelists maybe reflect on that a little bit on what they did when people were in maybe the earlier part of their career and you had to be good in data, but it was hard to get to, or it was not very clean, and how they managed that, because it is important to have, to be good at data.
Well, I always say, in absence of data, it's only an opinion. And you can't make business decisions on opinions, because when you do, the outcomes are absolute disaster. So there's this maturation process that's happening with data. So if you look back at data even 5 years, 10 years, there weren't the platforms that we have today to help us, dive deeper into our customer engagement or usability, and all of these things weren't there at the time, but you had focus groups, right? You had, one-way mirror sessions. And now you move forward into, heat maps and all of these other areas that you can start to collect data. And, there wasn't, Hadoop 10 years ago. But guess what? There are now all of these great technologies, stack that can help you read these tea leaves. So I think, again, it's going to be really important to understand the technologies, understand how companies are using it, and then understanding how they're applying it to help drive their business growth.
Yeah, I agree with Tony. I mean, I think there's always a way, it's just like you go back to college and you think about, you have to submit a research paper and you have to be able to substantiate your line of thinking, right? You have to find a way to do that. And research is a great way, right? If you don't have the mechanics in place or the behavioral tracking or sophisticated CDP or whatever it is that can automate some of these things rather, doing customer surveys, doing focus groups, all of those things will help you support, or exactly what Tony said. If you don't have some level of data or justification, it's just an opinion.
Yeah, just to jump in, sorry, I didn't mean to catch up. Often, when on the onset of COVID, obviously everybody knows hiring, very much, it slowed down. It did not stop. And, people were always asking, what sort of positions are companies hiring for? And me personally in marketing, and just as across all of Verseek and all of our practice areas, the one position that really remained constant is operations, whether that be marketing ops, sales ops, just ops in general. Because when you think about it conceptually, companies are going, okay, well, top line, we're not going to grow as much as we thought we were coming into this. So how do we now, still try to hit our numbers? And that's becoming more efficient, right? And putting in place operational efficiency allows you to, again, maybe not grow as much as you want, but you're also not probably spending as much or just getting more efficient was the thing. And all that comes through data. Data analysts, ops positions were some that companies were still hiring for, even on the onset of COVID. Sorry, go ahead, Heather.
The only thing I would add to that, there's a storytelling nature to it, and there's the so what. So I think you really have to get past I've got all the data, but what does it mean, and what am I going to do because of it? And how do I tell that story? Because a lot of the individuals that we're sharing it to aren't marketers by trade, and they don't understand what all these things mean and if they're important or not. And so you have to crystallize it down into something that is meaningful to them that then you can go take action on.
Yeah, that's great. One question that came through in the comment section or in the chat section here. Did each of you want to move up in your career, or did you find yourself in growing positions? And then similarly, did you want to be in marketing, or was that something that you had kind of more fallen into? So I see a lot of smirks coming out. I'll let the three of you take that one.
Well, for me, I've worked in various industries. It doesn't, professional services, professional sports, entertainment, technology. But at the end of the day, the sinew that kind of holds true to all of it has been strategy. I've always wanted to be at the highest level of strategy. And the reason why is marketing, ops, finance, they're all aspects that drive a broader strategy. So for me, my career had really been curated with there's really no end game. My end game is, if anything, is being a strategic advisor. So if I tell companies today, if I 80-20 the business, 20% of what I do is working in the business, tactically on some operational issue or opportunity. The 80% is working on the business, working with C-level leaders, boards, and folks that are trying to make broader long-range decisions about their business and making sure they have the human capital, the tech stack, and the right positioning to grow the company in the manner they had promised or hoped to. So to me, that's kind of my thinking around it is that.
I would say it was interesting as I was thinking about the transition. I shared with you sort of the 4 criteria. Marketing was never one of them. It didn't say that I needed to be CMO. The number one thing for me was leading, being a strong leader. And to Tony, that strategic side of it is what just like fuels me. Yeah. That it was meaningful work, that it was something I'd go after. So that could come in a lot of different forms. And I know, Tony, we were chatting about sometimes CMOs turn into the chief transformation officer. Like there's other career paths. This isn't the end, but it's how do I have meaningful work? How do I sit at that table? How do I make a difference and really get to lead high performing, powerful teams is what motivated, inspired me throughout my career. And then the other thing that was just the curiosity of like wanting to learn new things. Yeah. I think I'm about the worst at sitting around doing the same thing over and over because I'll recreate it in a way that didn't need to be recreated. So give me another challenge and another challenge. And that is how my career was curated, is just being able to do new things and challenge myself, but always around leading and building high performing teams.
Great. I always did want to be in marketing. I did want to lead a team. Part of that is just being a competitive person, right? And wanting to achieve something. But I will say, there are many times I questioned if I was making the right decision. And I think that's okay for people on the call to do that, because you may find at a certain level of, your career, you're in a job that you love, or you're doing the specific tactic within marketing that you want to spend your life doing. You know, if your passion is doing creative, then maybe being a CMO is not the right thing, because you give up a lot of that along the way to leading a team, where you're then spending more time on other things, including HR activities and work closely with the finance team. So you also have to be willing to let go some of your passions to get there. And that's a choice everybody has to make.
Mhm.
Yeah, and one, again, a common theme I'm hearing is, marketing. Well, so really the goal of every company is to make money. I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, you can cut it up any different way you want, but the goal of every company is to make money, and the only way you make money is by selling something or getting customers. Okay, and how you get those customers is marketing, right? And that's the piece that I love about it. It's figuring out the value proposition of the product and the service, and I always say is selling today is not selling, right? I mean, selling 30 years ago, was so much different than it is today, because the only information that you had was from the person who was standing right in front of you giving it to you, and you had to take them at their word, because you didn't have all of the different resources at your disposal at your, everybody's phone. Right now, everybody has the same information, so you're not selling anything. What you're doing is you're helping them make an educated decision. Right. And if you can, and marketing is everybody knows that, you call up a prospect. I mean, salespeople, get oh yeah, call me back. I don't have time right now. Send me some information and call me back. Right. All of the buying, purchase power, or all of the decision-making is done prior to coming in contact with a sales position. So it's that the business strategy of how do we, cut through the noise and get somebody interested in this one thing, to impact that. That's what I love about marketing. It's so much fun. And I think Tony's point in all of your points, it's the strategy behind that.
Yeah.
Any other, Edwin, did I miss any questions in there? I thought I kind of went.
The one comment came in was regarding employee wellness, and you've addressed it a little bit, but
Okay.
yeah, the attendee really enjoyed you guys bringing it up. It used to be something that you probably would hide and go to work anyway, and that's probably changing quite a bit with COVID. And they just appreciated you bringing it up. If you have any other comments there, feel free to add to it.
I would tell you, I feel like I love that we're becoming more open about our well-being from all different facets, from the mental side to the physical side and all of that. And I think, the more we can do that, the more we can improve it, because we need to talk about it. I feel like we're doing a good job of creating tools for individuals and how to manage that. And COVID has really started pushing us on all these things need to be in balance. And if you over-index on one, usually another one suffers. Mm-hmm. An area that I feel like I personally need growth in, and I think the industry needs help in, is how do you help manage through that? How do you help support team members as they're going through that? And I feel like that tool set isn't as strong as I wish it was. And it's probably because it's been so hidden for so long that then you don't create tools to help managers because no one talked about it. Now we're talking about it, which is great. But then I feel like we need more in how do you lead and support through that.
Yeah, That's great.
Agreed.
Well, we're running up against 9:30 here. I do want to make just kind of another housekeeping announcement. If you did like the content here, the Business Marketing of Minnesota, our organization, is actually doing another webinar September 16th. It's going to be called Cutting Through the Noise, Developing Effective Digital Content. The speakers include Chris Shermer of Shermer, and Carlos Abler, who was the former head of content for 3M. I know I don't have his official title, but two just excellent speakers. And so it's definitely one of those things. We'll be sending out communication. Everybody that registered here, we'll be sending out a communication on that webinar. But definitely, I mean, as we talked about, in COVID, trying to cut through the noise, obviously a very relevant topic as well. So if there's any other thoughts, questions from the panelists before we kind of jump off here.
I have maybe one point just for myself. I think each one of us might have just a closing point. Music is extremely important to me, and hopefully it is to all of us. So when you feel, stressed or challenged, make sure you listen to music that can calm you, can elicit the kind of mindful thought that you hope to have. But throughout my career, I've listened to every kind of music there is, but there's one particular song that has always been in the arsenal, and it's by Leonard Skinner. I know it's old school, but I'm telling you. But the song's called "Be a Simple Kind of Man," and that's how I approach my life. And I think it's important that the key phrase in that song is "Do what you love and what you understand," and that's it. So if you're in transition and you're trying to figure out what comes next, do what you love and what you understand. The rest will fall into place.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Great stuff, Tony. With that, jump in. Sorry, go ahead, Heather. I didn't mean to continue.
I will tell you my mantra through all of this, and it was actually sparked in February. We were at Investor Day in New York, and we got to close the stock market on the day it crashed. That was just an interesting moment. And I was walking around, and I was trying to find a book, and I was in Barnes & Noble, the last retailer I've been in since COVID. And I found this journal, and the topic was grace and gratitude. And so one of the things we've done as a family is every night, my kids and I sit down and we write our top 3 things that we're grateful for. But I will tell you, throughout this, having grace for yourself and for all those that are around you, and then just finding things to be grateful for has been sort of my mental way of staying above it and moving forward. So I just think it's really important that everybody's on a journey, and just having that grace and then also finding the gratitude is just critical right now.
Yeah, great. Absolutely.
I think Heather and Tony nailed it, so I will simply say thank you.
No, and I will as well. This has been so much fun. I mean, the 3 of you, thank you so much. I mean, I'm looking in the comments section here, and just a lot of hey, thank you so much. Fantastic webinar. Took a copious amount of notes. Just a lot of great insight. And I again, thank you so much for the willingness to share your thoughts, share your insight. I mean, again, I'll kind of end with something that I started off, and there's certain sayings that everybody takes through their entire life, and one of them that has always stuck with me, which is always take advice from people who are where you want to be. And it's just clear after the time we've spent, not only today but on the prep call as well. You're definitely 3 people that I think a lot of people would aspire to be. So thank you again so much for your time. Very much appreciated. We'll look forward to our next maybe in-person meeting. Tony, we'll get you a flight. Yeah, there we go.
Tony's gonna drive out. He needs to add those miles.
Yeah. I'm getting that RV, man. I'll see you in 4 days.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. We're going to sign off. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and take care.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.